Children of the Longhouse by Joseph Bruchac. Chapter 9. Sticks. After the morning meeting, Ohkwa'ri went out from the village in the opposite direction from the river. So much had happened so quickly. He was excited, but he was also worried about the anger he had seen in Grabber's face. "I need to find some place away from the village where I can be alone to think," Ohkwa'ri said to himself. He crossed the stony cornfield and began to climb the slope of Big Nose, the hill over their village. He stopped to look back and saw a small poplar tree tremble slightly, as if brushed by someone who had stepped behind it to avoid being seen. He continued to climb slowly. He wanted whoever was following him to think that he was not aware anyone was behind him. When he was near the top of the slope, he stopped, turned quickly, and sat down. There was a noise below him, like the sound of someone slipping and starting to fall. He scanned the slope out of the corner of his eye. A long stone's throw below him, he saw several hands reach out and pull Falls-a-Lot, who had tripped onto his face, back behind a boulder where he could not be seen. Ohkwa'ri stood up and stretched. He turned slowly and moved out of sight of those following him. This time, though, when he was out of sight, he began to run. He made a half circle, cutting off the trail and then slipping down the hill, stepping from rock to rock so that he left no footprints. Soon he was below the 4 young men who were following him. Hidden in the brush by the trail, he looked up and saw them ahead of him. They were still going uphill, following his tracks. They had sticks in their hands. The sticks were not ball game sticks. It was clear to Ohkwa'ri that they were intended to be used on him. Ohkwa'ri crossed the river and climbed the hill to his new lodge. Tonight would not be a good night for me to sleep alone in my lodge, he thought. Grabber and his friends might come and beat me up. But he had left his ball stick there and needed to come and get it. When he reached the lodge, he took the Ohkwa'ri stick and sat down on the hill to look at it. It was made of hickory, one of the strongest woods. He had played many games with that stick. Its handle was smooth from use. At the end, the stick was bent into a half circle. The webbing of deer sinew fastened there was darkened with age. It was a good stick, but now Ohkwa'ri was worried. The stick was old, and there was a crack in it along the handle. It might break. Also, the stick was now a little small for him because he had grown so much over the last winter. Ohkwa'ri stood up. He placed the end of his stick on the ground and held it against him. It only came up a little above his waist. To fit a man properly, his ball stick should be at least as high as his armpit. When Ohkwa'ri's people played Ohkwa'ri, they did so holding their sticks with 2 hands. Their ball game sticks were bigger than those of any of the other 4 nations of the Longhouse. This stick of his was more like the size of a stick that would be used by the marshy land people who lived toward the sunset. Ohkwa'ri had intended to make a new stick for himself, but it was not something that could be done quickly. First, the hickory log would have to be cut, and that was always done in the fall. Then it would be split into 4 pieces or more, using stone wedges and a heavy wooden club to drive them. That splitting would be done in the cold of the winter, when the tough hickory would be easier to split. Next, the stick would be roughly shaped and bent in 2 places, holding the stick over boiling water so that the steam would soften it and make it possible to bend it just right. Then the stick would be carefully stored to allow it to season. It would not be until late summer that the final work of shaping and smoothing the stick down would be done. The holes to string the lacing of the net would be made with a bow drill, and the stick would be oiled with bear grease. It took a full year to make a ball stick. Ohkwa'ri sat back down and placed his stick on the earth in front of him. It was no use to think of making a new stick now. This stick was old and small, but it would have to do. He would have to put his mind into preparing for the big game on the following day. It would begin at dawn. Ohkwa'ri cocked his head and put one hand up to cup it behind his ear. He could hear someone coming up the hill. He listened carefully. More than one person was coming. Perhaps Grabber and his friends were looking for him again. As he listened, Ohkwa'ri decided that whoever was coming was walking quietly, but not trying to be quiet. This was not the sound of people moving slowly and creeping up on an enemy. This was the sound of regular footsteps made by people whose walk was always quiet. "Sego?" A voice that Ohkwa'ri recognized called up to him. It was his uncle, Big Tree. "Hello." "Sego," Ohkwa'ri called back. Soon Big Tree and the two other tall men who had come up the hill with him were sitting in front of the boy's lodge. Big Tree's hands were empty, but the other two held the things that they had been carrying. In Hand Talker's case, it was a long bundle wrapped in pale deerskin. Ohkwa'ri's father, Two Ideas, was carrying a bundle of sticks in his powerful hands. Those sticks looked familiar to Ohkwa'ri. They were the ones that Grabber, Greasy Hair, Eats Like a Bear, and Falls a Lot had been carrying earlier. They had been broken into short lengths. "Your new lodge is a good one," Big Tree said, putting his hand on the elm bark shingles, which had been carefully placed so that each layer overlapped the one below. Two Ideas put down the sticks next to Ohkwa'ri's hearth. He began to set them up to make a fire. "These sticks," he said, "were meant for you." He looked up and smiled at Ohkwa'ri. "I think you know that someone else was carrying them. When I met them on top of the hill over there," Two Ideas motioned with his chin toward the top of Big Nose across the river, "I told them that I would take those sticks the rest of the way. At first they did not agree." Two Ideas struck his big hands together, making a sound louder than the slap of a beaver's tail on the water. "However, after I talked to them a little, they agreed to give the sticks to me. Then they were in such a hurry to go to their homes that they fell down the hill. I think they are a little bruised now." Two Idea paused again and then went on, his voice more serious. "They are bruised, but not too bruised to play in tomorrow's game. It would be wise to watch out for them. Because of their little accident, they may try to hurt other people when they play." Hand Talker put his hand next to his head and made the circling motion to indicate that someone's thoughts were twisted. It was the hand sign that people used to indicate anger. Then he put his hand on his heart and extended it palm out toward Ohkwa'ri. It was the sign for that which is good. Ohkwa'ri understood. This meant that his Uncle Hand Talker was thinking good thoughts for him. It also meant that he should keep his own heart good when he played Dekwaradan. Then Hand Talker pushed the long bundle over to his nephew. Ohkwa'ri unwrapped it. Even though he had guessed what it would be, his heart still jumped when he lifted it up. It was a beautifully made ballgame stick. It was light in his hands. In fact, it felt as if it was pulling him up to his feet. He stood and made the motions of catching the ball, cradling it and then throwing. He had never felt a stick like this one before. All ball sticks were alive, but this one had so much life that it felt almost as if it could play Dekwaradan without him. "This stick was made by your Uncle Hand Talker," Big Tree said. "Hand Talker made it for Thunder's Voice 3 winters ago. But it has never been used. Thunder's Voice kept it stored under his bench in the Longhouse. Now Thunder's Voice has given it to you. If you are to be an old man tomorrow, it is right for you to play the game with a stick that was made for an old man."